And we will be moving forward to our next session on food safety, which will be monitored by Professor Riyad Abeid, who is the professor and the chairman of the Department of Clinical Nutrition, College of Health Sciences and Dietetics at the University of Sharjah. He has received his PhDs in food science and nutrition from the Massey University in New Zealand. His research expertise has been shaped by his work at several institutions in Jordan, the United States, New Zealand, and the United Arab Emirates. His research team at the University of Sharjah collaborated with leading local institutions such as the Supreme Council for Family Affairs, Sharjah City for Humanitarian Services, and the Dubai Municipality, as well as international institutions such as the University of Manitoba and Jordan University of Sciences and Technology. He has authored over 105 research publications that were published in reputable, peer-reviewed international journals. Thank you, Professor Abeid, for being with us.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just for a change, all the sessions about nutrition and kidney-related disease, now we have another session. We call it food safety session. Food safety actually is the scientific discipline or methods for food handling, preparation, cooking, serving, and storing in a way to prevent health hazards. Of course, when we start talking about health hazards, means we are talking about microbial, chemical, and physical hazards. And we are going to spend 1 hour with the expert in food safety from different countries. We are going to start with Dr. Salah Shukhail. He is the head of Nutrition and Dietetic Department, Sultan Qaboos University Hospital, in Oman. He's got a BS or obtained BSc degree from University of Jordan in 1979, and MSc degree in we are going to start with Dr. Ali Rashid. He is the General Manager and General Directorate of the General Administration of Nutrition, Ministry of Health, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. His duties plan, develop procedure and KPI in food service, nutrition awareness and specification of food service and Ministry of Health. Of course, he is doing the food service in hospitals and compliance with HACCP and ISO 22000. And he supervises Saudi National Breastfeeding Program, the Nutrition Surveillance Program, and Micronutrients Deficiency Prevention Program. He participated in many conferences and published many articles, peer-reviewed articles. Please, Dr. Ali Rashid.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the scientific committee to having me today to present my presentation, which is about food safety requirements in food premises and application of HACCP system. Today I will give you a brief offer a few of my topics, which are food safety aims and benefit of good food safety, and cost of poor food safety, and prevalence of food poisoning, and hazard analysis and food safety tips in general and for food handlers, and the principle of HACCP system. Food safety refers to handling and preparing and also storage food in a way to minimize and prevent the food illnesses. The principle of food safety aims to prevent contamination, which lead to reduce food spoiling and prevent food poisoning. Next, the aim of food quality and safety, health control of food staff from the beginning to know the source of known and well-known market. Health control of workers, make sure about the food handlers, they are comply with food safety policy and make sure about the personal hygiene. Health control offer the food trading venue like supermarket, canteen, and restaurant. What's the benefit of good food safety? Having healthy meal satisfied the consumer, taste and texture, and confident of the consumer, healthy consumer and healthy employee, reduce the waste and food loss. Compliance with HACCP and ISO 22000, pleasant working environment. The cost of poor food safety. Operating cost increase, reduce productivity, which is lead to hospitalization and even death, loss confidence and bad publicity, food waste and loss, and unsuccessful defense of legal action can lead to damage the company's reputation. I'm gonna now to address the various hazard of hazard. First one, like biological bacteria and viruses, which is the biggest threat of food safety and lead the majority of foodborne illnesses. Chemical cleaning supply, also physical from foreign objects which come from food handlers. If they are not comply with the personal hygiene, it might damage and contaminate the food from dirt and hair and the glasses. Let's have a look to the prevalence of food poisoning. There were an estimated 600 million cases in different 22 foodborne illnesses, especially in enteric disease. Food poisoning causes 351 associated with death worldwide. The most deaths were come from Escherichia coli, Salmonella, norovirus. Over 40% suffering from enteric disease caused by contaminated food were children. Let's focus to the US. According to CDC, estimated that 1 in 6 American people get sick. 128 are hospitalized due to food contamination. Estimated that 3,000 die from foodborne illnesses in the US. Who is at risk? The pregnant and lactating women, the elderly, and young children, impaired immune system. How does food become contaminated? The most effective one, it's come from cross contamination. If the food handlers not wear corrective clothes and use the clean utensils, which is lead to the cross contamination, and we have make sure about the main source of the food contamination. We have to focus to proper storage and using right temperature and put the food at the storage at shelf and make a space to the air turnover and temperature at fridge and freezer, freezing, time, hygiene, sanitation. This is, for example, flow diagram of the catering operation. We have, as I mentioned, make sure about the food and the raw food materials. It come from well-known source, and make sure about the storage process and the preparation, and also serve the food at the right temperature for different categories. Food storage, it can be divided to 4 main groups. The dry food like flour, sugar, rice. Semi-dry food, as you know, some kind of fruits and vegetable. Perishable food like milk or juices and yogurt and cheese. Frozen food, it must be kept and to the right temperature, like -18, and the shelf life of the frozen food, it lasts to up to 12 months. Food safety tips: keep the inside of the refrigerator very cold and the lowest shelves being the coldest. Never stuff meat and turkey until you are ready to cook them. After thawing food, you must cook them directly before refreezing. Any food any food containing mayonnaise, it must keep at a fridge. You have to wash the fruit and vegetable before you are ready to eat them. Food hand washing. According to a recent study, the most cross-contamination and the food contamination in general come from food handlers, and they are must to follow a proper hand washing procedure. They must, and all of us, when you are dealing with the food, we must wet our hand under running water, use soap, and scrub our hand vigorously between 10 to 15 minutes. I'm sorry, 15 seconds at least. Rinse thoroughly under running water, and use dry our hands with single towels. When we should wash our hand before and during deal with the food, handling uncooked meat, because most bacteria transfer from poultry like Salmonella, Escherichia coli, before and after using gloves to prevent germs, before eating, after touching garbage, after touch or cleaning surface, after going to the toilet. Protective clothes, we should wear right clothes for right work, food, safe gloves and hair nets. It's prevent the foreign objects, and clean aprons and gloves towel more will help hygienically to protect the food and serve the healthy food to the consumer. We should change our clothes as soon as possible. It's become soiled or torn. The food handlers must tell their supervisor if it's become torn or damaged. What is the food hazard principle? First one, hazard analysis. Identify a critical control point. Establish a critical control point. Monitoring control point. Verification of a critical control point, and establish corrective action and record keeping procedure. Critical control point like microbial or chemical, it can be removed by proper cleaning. and pathogenic bacteria. It can be minimized if we are safe the food to the proper temperature, chemical residue and contamination. It can be managed from the first step when you receive the food, and make sure to store the chemical separately and away from the food. Last slide, it's cover the regulation of food quality and safety. We have the food premises and restaurants must comply with hazard system, which is this is the systematic approach of food safety to minimize the hazard like physical and chemical and biological, to make sure the food is safe and minimize the risk. And also the big company must comply with ISO 22000, which is make sure about the international food supply chain. As you know, I'm from Saudi Arabia. We must comply in hospital kitchen, and companies in Saudi Arabia, they must comply with this FDA regulation, and also any recommendations issued by international organization and recognized scientific society. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Al-Rashid, for the excellent information about HACCP. By the way, just to inform you, yesterday and today, talking about diet, healthy diet, wherever, healthy diet without safety, without food safety, will not be considered. Okay, food safety and nutrition going side by side. Even around the globe, we have the food regulations and laws concept endorse the food safety management system. As Dr. Ali mentioned about HACCP ISO 22000, even some countries, they consider these systems mandatory in their system, in the food industry, in the food institution services, even in hospitals, all more or less the same. We have to produce a safe food, which is considered as a mandatory for consumers. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. Now, the second speaker, we have Dr. Salah Al-Shufeli. He is the head of Nutrition and Dietetic Department, Sultan Qaboos University Hospital in Oman. Received BSc degree, University of Jordan, 1979, MSc degree from University of Griffith in Australia, and also he's got another degree, MBA, from University of Hull in UK. He's been trained in UK in bone marrows of metabolism. He's going to talk about food safety beyond food safety in hospital setup. Please, Mr. Salah.
Thank you very much for all the audience, and thank you for being here. My presentation today going to be a food safety beyond food safety in a hospital setup. The outline of my presentation will be introduction, food safety, healthy diet, conclusion, and summary. The objective is to explain the distinction between food safety and healthy food. In Arabic, it's a little bit vague. نقول الغذاء السليم والغذاء الصحي. So I want to explain what's the food safety and what is healthy food. There's a difference between them. To understand food safety from the dietitian point of view, to complete the following sentence using the word safe or healthy. So all dot food are dot food, but not all dot food are dot food. So this is the puzzle that we have to complete by the end of my session. Okay, wait. Okay, so the introduction of my presentation will be food safety in hospital setting is more critical compared to other catering settings. such as schools, colleges, universities. Why food hospital is more critical in the hospital? Because two main reasons. The venue itself, the hospital setup is more within infection. People are coming there, they have infection disease, the equipments are infected, there's a blood transfusion that's cause of source of infection. So that's why it makes the hospital one of the most infected area that food have been served if you compare to institutional food. Another thing that it makes the hospital more critical is the customers that we are serving, which we call them patients. People receiving food, they have different names. So in our setup, hospital setups, we call them patients. Those patients, as Dr. Ali said, they could be elderly, young children, pregnant women, and they are the most vulnerable population of the community. And in addition to that, they are the most immune compromised patient or people. So we have to be, the food safety have to be more sophisticated than any other setup. In addition to that, when we look at the food safety, we don't look at the food safety from the conventional contamination. There are other type of contamination that we have to look for each and individual patient. And addition to all of this, there's like when you see the water in front of your table, that could be a life-threatening food item for a patient having difficulties of swallowing. So even the water in front of your table could be a lethal food item for a sick patient. So food safety from my presentation going to be into two parts: food safety from production point of view and from dietitian point of view. So when you go to the slogan of the food safety people, they'll tell you from the farm to the fork. That's the scope of food safety. What happened after the fork when we ingest or when we eat the food? Does it affect us or no? So it's not only about from the farm to the fork, but there is beyond that. So according to the USDA definition of food safety, it's the conditions and practices that preserve the quality of food to prevent contamination and foodborne illnesses. As we saw in the previous speaker, foodborne illnesses took around 350,000 lives in the United States by itself. So these practices are observed during handling, preparation, storage, and distribution of food. My personal opinion, it goes even before the handling, because you have to make sure that the food comes from a very well-known source. Otherwise, like even if it is, you receive it as contaminated food, whatever handling you're gonna do, you'll not be successful with that. So why food safety important for us as a hospital? Of course, to prevent complications to the patients. We know that the patient already they are immunocompromised. So any other we don't need an extra trigger for them to be sick. So therefore, we might in my hospital we have different type of patient safety. One of those food safety as well, because food is a source of could be a source of disease, and it might lead to different complication. So if let's say in some countries, the hospital or the organization or the institute are paid according to their output. They just don't get fixed amount of funds from the government. So if you have a food poisoning in your hospital, that would be a bad reputation for you. Therefore, like for claiming for funds from the government, it would be much hard for you to get the funds from the government. And in addition to that, if I'm a patient and I get food poisoning, now I need to treat the food poisoning, and that will lead to more usage of antibiotics, will increase the length of hospital stay. That's mean more money that I'm losing as an institution. And that, in addition to that, you might be sued by the family or the patient by himself, and they might take you to the courts for the food poisoning if the patient survived the food poisoning. So the economical cost of food poisoning or foodborne illnesses, I just want to show you an example just for the biological. We just chose 5 different pathogens for biological contamination. In 2018, it cost the United States around $18 billion. That money could be saved and could be reinvested in something else. But I want to show you the cost as well of the chronic disease of by selecting unhealthy food. So unsafe food will cost $18 billion, but unhealthy food will cost much more than 300 or 400 or 500 billion dollars annually. So type of food contamination, as Dr. Ali mentioned earlier, we have 3 classical type, biological, which include bacteria, mold, fungus, and parasite and viruses. This will lead to a food poisoning, foodborne disease. We have chemicals like the most common chemicals we have, the cleaning chemicals, domestic cleaning chemicals. Sometimes, like we have a help assistance at home or domestic assistance. She's not very well educated and she used the bleach and she doesn't rinse the utensils very well. That might lead to food poisoning. Pesticide, unfortunately, we have a lot of cases sometimes. The farmers are not very well educated about when they should harvest or when they should use the pesticide and when they should harvest. It should be around 14 days or 2 weeks, depending on the pesticide. And then non-permitted food additives. Of course, we have a huge and hungry food industry that will do anything to make to sell their product, no matter what it is, to sell their product and to make more money. And we have physical contaminants like jewelries that are used by the food handlers, hair and fingernails, plastic and broken glasses, and this could cause different type of injuries and wounds to the person who's consuming the food. In my previous slide here, I forgot to tell you last year, one of the best American companies, they had a problem with the food, with the contamination in their product. And they lost billions of dollars because they had to recall all the products from the market and they have to stop their production and they have to be again reinvestigated thoroughly by the and health, food and safety in the United States. And it's still affecting us until now. That companies which withdraw their infant formula and it caused 3 deaths in the United Kingdom. So until now, we are still affected. And it's not only the financial cost that you're losing, but you're losing the trust and the faith of your consumers as well. So food safety, again, as Dr. Ali said, the hand wash procedure is one of the best procedures and the simplest, and yet still people are not following it. So hand washing procedure is very crucial to prevent food contamination. Again, we have separation of raw material and cooked material have to be separated. Cooking in the proper temperature will ensure that the patient, the food is free of pathogens, and of course, storage in a proper temperature or serving it in the proper temperature will eliminate or reduce the risk of developing of food contamination or food poisoning in your institution. Of course, we have the HACCP, we just heard about them, HACCP, and we have the 7 major principles, as Dr. Ali said, analyze hazard that must be prevented. Number 1, if not eliminated, it's already there. You cannot prevent it, it's already there. Or reduced. If you cannot eliminate, at least reduce it. I'll give you an example. Like in our hospital, we don't have receiving areas outside the hospital, under the sun. So I cannot prevent the, food to be exposed to the heat. I cannot prevent that. But I try to reduce it by having a good storekeeper that he could put good timings, and the food, once the truck is there, should come in immediately. And we check the temperature inside the hospital. We are not working in a very ideal situation, but we try to reduce as much as we can. identify critical control points, establish preventive measurements, continuous monitoring. This is very crucial. With the patient, with the people, food handlers, unfortunately, they're not the most educated people, and the turnover of the food handlers is very fast. You get someone, you train them. After 3 months, he moves to another place. You have to train somebody else. So continuous monitoring will help to reduce the risk of food poisoning or food contamination, establish corrective action, establish a procedure to verify the system is working, and finally, documentation. When you document, you can do traceability. And like if you have good reputation, if you have a good hospital, then you will be able to present your documents to the audit, external audit. Come, look, this is what I've been doing. So in case if something happens, still you are protected somehow. The second part of my presentation now, looking at the food safety from dietitian's point of view. Dietitians deal with different type of disease. Dietitian will use the food in three main things. How me as a dietitian, I'm dealing with the food. I'm using the food to prevent diseases, number one. Number two, to maintain the diseases. We heard Dr. Selwa, she said, not all elderly will have Alzheimer's. Some elderly, they still be enjoying the health status. So I'm a dietitian. I would use food to maintain this health status of the patient or the person. Then number three, we have the management. Patient is already diagnosed with the disease. Dietitian will use the food to address that disease or to manage that disease. We deal with patients. We deal with elderly children, pregnant women, a patient with compromised immune system. So here I want to explain the role of where's the food and where's the diet? Are they the same? When you ask a student what is diet, they'll tell you low calories thing. No, food is different and diet is different. I'll just give you an example to explain to you. If I'm a restaurant owner, I will look at the food as a product that I sell to get money. If I'm the chef in the same restaurant, I'll look at the food as the main ingredient to create a beautiful thing that have my signature as a chef. If I'm the waiter in the same restaurant, I'll look at the food as a meal that I have to sell it to the customer to get a fat tip. So you see, in the same setup, people will look at the food in different ways. For me, food and diet is the two different issues. Food is a part of a diet. So how do I define a diet? When I hear the word diet, the first thing come to my head is a system. Diet is a system of what? Of consuming certain quality of food and certain quantity to achieve a certain goal in a given time. A diet is made out of 4 factors: quality of food, quantity, goal, and given time. The goals have to be smart. We have to be specific. Let's say for just an example, weight reduction. We know a person comes with a weight to 90 kgs. You want to reduce the weight to 70 kgs. So the goal is specifically weight reduction. Is it measurable? Yes. From 90 to 70, 20 kgs have to go away. Achievable? Yes. People losing weight. Realistic? Yes. If it is conjugated with the time. I cannot lose 20 kgs in 10 days, but in 1 year, yes, it's achievable. So time frame makes the diet realistically or not. في واحدة بتروح العرس على نهاية الأسبوع وتبي تخسر 20 kilos. It can't be. That's not realistic. So again, going to the my plate, which was represented by Ms. Farah earlier. I want to define the healthy diet. Healthy diet, 3 words to me: balance, nutrients, and energy. If you don't have those 3 together, it's not a healthy diet. For instance, if you are a person you are consuming calories more than what you require, that will lead to overweight, will lead to obesity, will lead to metabolic disorders. If you are a person that you are consuming under the calories requirement, that will lead to weight loss, emaciation. It will affect the immune system. You'll be more prone to disease. Then your immune system will be again damaged. You'll be prone to disease. Then you go to a virtuous cycle between weight loss, infection, and other diseases. So a diet should be adequate, moderate, balanced, and verified. And this is the base of all the diets that we need to modify for our patient. This is the base. This is the ground zero. Then we can modify it according to the individual's need. So I'll start with dysphagia, how food could be a threat to our patient, starting with the dysphagia. In order for you to utilize the food, you have to go through 3 main or 4 processes. You have to eat the food from your mouth, have to be digested, have to be absorbed, then it have to be.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم everybody. My name is Najwa Babikr Al-Haj Khalifa. I'm going to present this work or this research of title Effects of Bacteriocin Producing Lactic Acid Bacteria on Sausage Keeping Quality Stored at freezing temperature or at 0 degree centigrade. This work, I did it with my supervisors, Prof. Al-Rakha and Prof. Ahmed Ali Mahdi. I thank them for their patience, for their keen for supervision during this work. The first thing that we are going to deal with it is introduction. We are facing many challenges nowadays, just like the using of chemical preservative, resistance of bacteria to antibiotic or multi-drug resistant bacteria, the use of stabilizing agent, which are affect the health of humans, and the increasing demand for safe food, which have enhanced the use of natural or the increase of demand for safe foods, which enhance the use of natural biopreservative to improve food's keeping quality. Scientists, okay, or people or researchers, okay, they used to deal with the application of antimicrobial peptides from microorganisms, particularly lactic acid bacteria. They use one of its products, which is bacteriocin. And why they use lactic acid bacteria? Because it is generally recognized as safe, and even their metabolites, okay. The bacteriocin that use is target or affect food spoilage microorganism and pathogens without being toxic for human being or affect or have other adverse effects on human health. This bacteriocin can be defined as metabolite compounds of lactic acid bacteria, which contributed to the food biopreservation. Now we can deal with the biopreservation or the definition of biopreservation. See what happened in material and methods. The first one is microbiological analysis and pH of ingredients used in the sausage preparation. The first thing that we use it or we choose it minced or lean meat, and we mince this lean meat, okay, intestines, and as we know here in Sudan we call it musran majroor, spices mix, and powder milk, where all these ingredients were microbiologically investigated according to 30 methods that mentioned by some scientists. We did it before sausage preparation. The second step in our experiment is the extraction of bacteriocin for sausage treatment. Here we choose lactic or the most active bacteriocin producers of lactic acid bacteria from a previous study. done by Najwa et al. These species were identified as Enterococcus faecalis, Pediococcus bentosus, and Lactobacillus murinus, and were purified and inculated individually in 1000 ml MRS broth for 72 hours at 30 degrees centigrade under anaerobic conditions. The second step for the extraction of bacteriocin, just we are going to heat the culture at 80 degrees centigrade in water bath for 20 minutes. The pH was adjusted to pH 7, and then the deposition of bacteriocin will be carried or was conducted at pH 2 to 2.5 using hydrochloric acid in the presence of sterilized sodium chloride, 0.1 molar. After that, we start extraction of bacteriocin by using centrifugation at 10,000 RPM for 20 minutes. Okay, we are going to have or to obtain two final product. We have these cells, okay, and then we have the cell-free supernatants, which we call it crude bacteriocin. I'm going here. We obtain cells and cell-free supernatant, which you call crude bacteriocin, and then we are going to deal with the crude bacteriocin. It is precipitated using ammonium sulfate of concentration 40% at 40 degrees centigrade to the stirring for 1 hour, and then we centrifugate it at 10,000 RPM. Also obtain another two products, supernatants and plates. Okay, here we are going to take the plates, which is in green rectangular. These plates were resuspended in thermal ultra pure water to obtain the partially purified bacteriocins. Here we are going to use these ready bacteriocins from each species, okay, and we extract it according to the methods of Young 1992 and Vera 2007. Now we are going to deal with the home made procedure or the steps of preparation of sausages at the laboratory. We follow the homemade procedure. We barricaded 4 kilograms of fresh lean beef for sausage manufacturing, and it was transported immediately in ice-cooled thermoflask to the laboratory. At the arrival to the laboratory, we investigated the total viable bacterial count, measured the pH, okay, and we analyzed all the chemical analysis was conducted. We analyzed the moisture content, protein, ash, fat, and dry matters on the arrival at the laboratory. After that, the lean meat that purchased from the market was minced through a sterile 8 millimeter mesh. We add salt, spices mixture, and the spices mixture include coriander, paprika, garlic, black pepper, nutmeg, Jamaica pepper, and powdered milk. All these were added, mixed well, and re-mince it again. Let us continue for the double treatment. As I mentioned before, we treat the sample or the lot with the E. faecalis 1 ml plus Pediococcus bentosus 1 ml, E. faecalis 1 ml plus Lactobacillus murinus 1 ml, Pediococcus bentosus 1 ml, and Lactobacillus murinus 1 ml. 1 ml from each species bacteriocin. I'm sorry, I said that 0.5. Then we, for the final one, For the final treatment is the triple treatment. Here I'm going to use 0.7 ml from each bacteriocin from each species. Eficalis 0.7 ml, Pediococcus pentosus 0.7 ml, Lactobacillus murinus 0.7 ml. Okay, and then sausages treated samples were stuffed into natural clean sheep intestine, which locally called musram majroor, and stored at 0 degrees centigrade for 20 days. The total viable bacterial count, the pH of the treated sausage samples were studied at 0, 3, 7, 10, 13, 17, and 20 days, and the chemical analysis after 7 days was analyzed after 7 days and 20 days of storage. Okay, now we are going to deal with the results. Okay, the first figure is dealing with the effect of bacteriocin on the from Eficalis on total viable bacterial count of sausage samples stored at freezing temperature or 0 degrees centigrade for 20 days compared with no bacteriocin. If we notice here, the total viable bacterial count for the treated sample is a decrease with the storage sample, while for the untreated sample or control sample, the total viable count is increased. And the pH for both treated and untreated sample is decreased with the storage time. Here, the second figure is dealing with the old treatment. We have 8 treatment. The first one, which is in a black color. Assalamu alaikum again. Here we are going to continue our results. Now we are going to deal with the effect of each bacteriocin on the total viable bacterial count, okay, compared with the untreated sample. Here we have figure 3 and 4 and 5, which are representing the single treatment. As it can be seen from the graphs that the total viable bacterial count of the sausage sample that treated with the Eficalis, okay, Pediococcus pentosius, okay, or the bacteriocin from Lactobacillus murinus, okay, decrease with the increase of the time as it compared with the control sample. Okay, for the figure 1, which is the sample treated with the Eficalis, here the reduction percentage about 83.5. For the sample treated with the Pediococcus pentosius, the reduction percentage about 87%. Okay, and for the sample treated with the Lactobacillus murinus with the 85% decrease in total viable bacterial count. Let us go to see the treatment with the double treatment, or the samples that are treated with the 2 types of the bacteriocin. We have here the first one is a sample treated with the Eficalis and Pediococcus pentosius. The second one is the Eficalis with Lactobacillus murinus, and the third one is effect of bacteriocin on total viable bacterial count extracted from Pediococcus pentosius and Lactobacillus murinus. Also, the similar trend we see it here, or can be observed here, that the total viable bacterial count decrease with the increase of total of the storage time as it compared with the other with the control sample. And here we can deal with the reduction percentage for the Eficalis plus Pediococcus pentosius bacteriocin about 90%, 90.1%. decrease in total viable bacterial count, while for Bidiococcus or E. faecalis,
Second, the last speaker, again recorded lecture, Professor Somia Qutbi. She is the head of department, College of Health Science, Public Health, University of Bahri, Sudan, MSc, BSc and MSc in Human Nutrition من أحفاد University for Women, PhD degree in Nutrition and Health from University of Juba. She is the head of department, and she's been involved in formulating programs in nutrition and dietetics in Sudan and abroad. She is going to talk about food diversity.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sumaya Salim Muhammad. My presentation about food diversity. These are the presentation outlines. So, global food security faces numerous challenges as long as human population continue to grow. So, what is diversity in food? First, we should know what diversity itself. Diversity condition or fact of being different or varied. So diversity in food means representation of all cuisines and culture, array of nutrients needed for a well-rounded diet, and variety of crop grown on the farm. So food diversity cited by many factors like access to land, livestock ownership, food garden availability, safe accessible water supply, stable climate condition, access to food shops, access to alternative food supply like school feeding, cash income to buy foods. This is all the cited factor for access to food diversity. So why we need food diversity? Of course, diversity means stability of life. So we need food diversity for continuous production of variety of foods for a more varied and thoroughly stable ecological community, and also continual access to a wide supply of vitamins and minerals. Again, we need food diversity for healthy gut microbiota. So the study that compared the microbiota in the elderly conclude that strongest influence on the microbiota is diversity of food. Also, we need food diversity for lower risk of food allergy and intolerance. So when we eat the same food again and again, this will cause allergy to that food. So researchers found that food diversity at 6 and 12 months of age had association with allergy, rhinitis, and asthma. So another study found that consuming a diverse diet rich in vegetables and fruits, as well as meals prepared at home, had fewer incidents of food allergies. Again, we need food diversity for nutrition synergy. So nutrients require synergetic action, work with each other, or the molecule to each with each others to provide beneficial effects. So many studies found that intake of fruits and vegetables correlated with health benefits. When you consume a variety of food means gain from thousands of phytochemicals acting together to provide many advantages for individual health. So again, we need food diversity for reduction of inflammation. So there is one study found that a variety of fruits and vegetables intake was inversely associated with lower amount of inflammatory biomarker C-reactive protein. And this will prevent many chronic disease. So again, we need food diversity for compact oxidative stress, and this is area of health should be mentioned because of antioxidant that found in some vegetables and fruits, and this is reduced lipid peroxidation and DNA oxidation. So we need to know, or in order to achieve food diversity, we need to know about One Health. One health means human health, animal health, and their shared environment. So the relationship between One Health and food diversity should be considered. First, we want to know what One Health. One Health has been defined as an integrally unified approach that aims to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems. So multiple sectors should work together to achieve better One Health. Professionals in human health, in animal health, environmental also, and the other areas of expertise should work together to achieve the One Health. So One Health be applied food safety, sustainable food production, and environment by bringing together interdisciplinary team to create a One Health network for overall public health. So food diversity can save from the climate crisis. So scientists, breeders, farmers use resilient plants that found in wild, and farmers reduce environmental degradation. So crop diversity in farmer fields able to cope with climate crisis. Globally, there is 820 million people suffer from insecurity and extremely poverty. So diversity and safe foods from healthy animals and plants will lead to health, lifestyle, and healthy environment. The One Health approaches is prevent outbreak of zoonotic disease in animal and people also, improve food safety and security, reduce antimicrobial resistant infection, and improve human and animal health, protect global health security, and also protect diversity and biodiversity of food. So here we arrive to dietary diversity. Dietary diversity, this is what we need to know much about it. Dietary diversity is important for individual health, defined as the number of different food groups consumed over a given period of time. Dietary diversity or diversity of food are good source for various macro and micronutrients and best ensure nutrients adequacy. So it reflects household access to variety of foods and at the same time nutrient adequacy for individual health. So why dietary diversity is important? Because it ensures nutrients adequacy. Because if we eat one single food, we will not gain many micro and micronutrients. But if we eat number of food groups, we can guarantee that we eat many micronutrients and macronutrients. So there is factor affecting dietary diversity like biological factors, economic factors, social factors, psychological factors, and attitude, belief, and knowledge about foods. These all are affected food diversity. Sometimes we have diverse of food, but we face by the attitude, beliefs of the people and food taboos. How we measure food diversity? We talk about food diversity, but we need to know how to measure food diversity. At individual level, at household level, we measure the access to food by household. At individual level, we measure dietary quality or micronutrient sufficiency of diet. So there is difference between household and individual survey when you want to measure dietary diversity. Okay, what the tool measures? Household survey is meant to reflect the economic ability of household to access variety of foods and household food security, but at individual level, quality of individual diet, which is micronutrient adequacy of diet. Respondent here at household is person responsible for food preparation for the household on the previous day, and later we will talk about this previous day. At individual survey, we are targeting women age at reproductive age from 15 up to 49, or other age group like particularly children or infant and young child. or adolescent also. Target of interests here at household is all persons living at household, and here in individual survey, those are response to the survey. What excluded and included in household survey include all food prepared at home and consumed at home, or purchase or gather outside and consume at home. We excluded purchase outside home and consume outside home. But at individual level, include all food eaten by individual consume inside or outside home, irrespective of where they were prepared. The number of food group included in household may be 12, maybe more than this, according to the study, according to the objective. In individual survey, organization said that 10 food group included in women diversity or for women at reproductive age, and 8 group for infant and young child. So the FAO developed standardized measure. This standardized measure can be administered for household or individual, which is collecting food over 24 recall. So these are the food established by FAO, starting from grain up to oil and fats, and you can see them here in this slide, 16 food group. So we can choose according to our study. So for women, we develop, or the FAO developed indicators called minimum dietary diversity. Women who consume 5 or more food group out of 10 considered an indicator to meet their macronutrients adequacy. For children from 6 to 23 months who consume at least 5 out of 8 food group on the previous day, consider indicator of their micronutrients adequacy, including breastfeeding. So this is minimum data diversity for children, starting from breastfeeding until other fruits and vegetables. And this is also number of food group for women at reproductive age, starting from grain and starch stable up to other fruits. So women at reproductive age, as we said, the 10 food group of women at reproductive age reflect their quality of macronutrients, because under them there is 11 micronutrients. These are the micronutrients that found in the 10 food group, starting from vitamin A up to zinc. And you find them here in these slides. The reference period, 24, why we set it to 24 recall, and we will not say 3 days or 7 days to reflect more accurate, because FAO found that it is just subjected to recall error, and also conforms to the recall time period used in many dietary diversity studies, and also easier than with longer recall period. The period of 24 is easier than with longer recall period. So why we focus on women? Because women are caregiver of children, and also for elderly and women at some countries like Africa and Asia, always eat second or serve food to the family member without sometimes eating, particularly in the time of famine. When compare men to women, women need more micronutrients because of always women deficient, or sometimes have deficiency in micronutrients, which is reflected to their health and their children's health. So how to measure dietary diversity? First, as I said, we collect the food through 24 recall hour, as you find in these slides. And then after that, we transfer these foods in form of food group, according to the food that taken by the person or individual or household. And then this is the column of food group, example of food that eaten by the person. Here are yes for 1 for yes, 0 for no. If I eat, for example, rice, wheat, sorghum, this is all considered 1. So I will put 1. If I do not eat, for example, from organ meat, like liver, kidney, heart, I will put 0. Then after that, I will make table like this to see what the person eat. If the person eat from starch stable 1, vitamin E rich fruits 1, legumes, beans 1, other vegetables 1, according to the food group eaten by the person, from fish and seafoods. Do not eat anything or organ meat or egg also. Do not from dark green leafy vegetables eat 1. I will add all of them or some of, or I sum the scores to see what score eaten by the person. If we give an example for minimum dietary diversity for women, if we account or some these scores, it will be 5. So that means this is the minimum dietary diversity of women or individual. So how to calculate the diversity or the diversity scores? Calculate the indicator value by summing up the score of all assessed household or individual and dividing the result by total number of assessed household or individual and multiply by 100. For example, calculation of minimum dietary diversity. Women at reproductive age who consume food and beverage from 5 or more food groups during the previous day divided by the total number of women at reproductive age surveyed multiplied by 100 to see the dietary diversity score, if it is 5 or more or less than this. So in addition to calculating dietary diversity score, it's also important to know which food group are predominantly consume at different level of score. For example, percentage of individual or household consuming vitamin A rich vegetables and tuber, dark green leafy vegetables, or vitamin A rich fruits from each food group. The number of household or individuals that consume, for example, vitamin A rich vegetables and tubers divided by the total number of respondents multiplied by 100 to see what food group are predominant also. So this is studies or example of studies that done. This is done in Kadugli, city in Sudan at 2022. They found that there's 61.7 of the women at reproductive age eat 5 or more from the food group, from the 10 food group, while 38.3 of them score low dietary diversity. Again, this is another study conducted in Mali, 2019, found that only 27% of women reach the minimum dietary diversity. That means women consume low than the dietary diversity that conduct for them. That means less than 5 or more. The women consume animal source food and vitamin A rich vegetables and fruits more frequently than did other women. Despite that, they consume less. So this is the study itself. Again, there is study in Bangladesh 2021-2022 found that the mean food group consumed by women at reproductive age was 4.63, indicating low dietary diversity and dominance of diet by grain and dark green leafy vegetables. And this is the same study. And this is a reference from when I took or I made the presentation. Thank you for listening.
This is from the recording from the source. I want just to mention about food diversity. might, from the nutrition point of view, I can say, based on the dietary guidelines, we are talking about healthy, balanced diet. Healthy, balanced diet. It can be defined as contains all the food groups, the 5, with the quantities required for our consumption, for calories. Okay, well, this is, and we have to encourage people to go for healthy diet, healthy, balanced diet. Thank you very much. I would like just to open the floor for any questions. Fortunately, we have Ustad Saleh with us. Dr. Ali Rashid apologized. He got a meeting at 12 and he left. Any questions for Ustad Ali from Oman? Us to come in here to the stage. Any question? Please.
Hello, doctor. Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I am working in a hospital and we do have a food service there. And the doctor here also said it's a never-ending battle, just securing all the critical points in the food service chain. Now, my question for you is, we try our best to secure all the critical points and deal with them. But from your point of view and from your expertise, what is the most critical point in the food service in a hospital that is usually neglected or not getting enough attention, or it's always an issue for, or you think it's the most important thing we need to focus on in the food service safety?
Thank you very much. It's a very nice question. Food culture. Food culture. Because if you have the best regulations, they are printed in illuminated paper on the wall, hanged everywhere. But if your employees are not, they don't understand the food culture itself, you know, like then it will be very difficult for you to achieve the food safety. In any system in the world, the human factor is the number one factor. So if you have the food, you know, like if you are food handlers, they understand about the importance of food safety, then they'll be fine. Then even you don't need to monitor them continuously because you know that there's a system working around and you know that they will encourage each other to do the right thing. You know, and you know, like when you go somewhere, everybody's washing their hands. Even if it's not your habit to wash your hand, you will wash your hand, correct? So, you know, like this is it. One of the most important thing is a hand washing procedure. Yet, as Dr. Ali said, even with that, a simple thing, still people are missing because they don't understand the concept of the food, the importance of washing. That's, if you want my opinion, that's the most critical. Maybe Prof. Riyadh will can
No,
help
actually,
us.
I have a question for you.
Oh, come on.
Anyway, I will leave. Thank you very much, Ustad Ali. Saleh, any other question? Because we have a limited time.
Okay,
Please.
very quick. Because I missed your first part of presentation, Salah, I'm not sure if you covered food services and catering in an aviation part, airports, and we have the healthcare part. What's your thought on it in terms of food safety? Which one do you feel is more compliance? Is it the aviation or healthcare? Number two, what's your thought? Because we know cutting costs now, people in healthcare are thinking of the cook and chill part from aviation. So in terms of safety for sick patients, what's your thought on that? Will that work or not?
Okay, let me tell you my background. I'm working from the government. When you talk about aviation, they have huge and massive resources compared to the government hospital because I'm working in the university hospital. Even healthcare, like treatment is not our first core. Our first core of the organization is teaching the medical professional, the doctors. So, you know, like if you can imagine teaching, then providing healthcare services, you can imagine catering where it will be like number 117 maybe. So our resources are very limited. While you compare to aviation catering, they make a lot of money out of it. So they have resources. So answering part one of your question, aviation resources is much better than the hospitals. And as you said, like maybe you missed the first few sentences, a few slides, because I said that hospital is more critical comparative to any institutional food services due to the two things: the premises itself, it's the hospital, the most contaminated facilities that anyone can go through. Number two, the nature of people are there who are patients. They have infectious disease and there's blood, there's a lot of infectious stuff. So, but in aviation, you don't have that. So, you know, even if you have bigger margin of little bit of unsafe food there. I hope that I answered your question.
Yeah, okay. I would like just to have your idea is a sort of question. From your background, from your experience, usually at the hospitals, we have two different procedures in applying food supply to the patients or the nurses or the staff. Now, the first procedure, usually the hospital, they have their own kitchen, their own staff. They prepare everything and serve. The other procedure, they have a contractor who provide the food. Which one you prefer
We do
in terms of food safety?
We do outsourcing of the services, but it's under supervision. We have, like my department is two departments: catering, supply, and the clinical side. So we have a department is monitoring the outsources food service company.
Yeah.
So it's not only they come with their procedures and everything, but yet we have our own controls.
Staff to supervise, monitor,
everything, like 24/7 we supervise.
To verify the system and everything.
Definitely, yes. And as the Professor Riyad says, food for the patient is very important. But when we develop our menu, when we sit for developing of menu, we have like 7 different professionals. One of them, the chef, one of them, the food safety officer, dietitian, nursing staff, speech therapist, and we have different type of people there when we do the menu development. So food safety is more than the nutritious content of the food in the hospital. I just want to endorse what you have been saying.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to thank again Ustad Salah, because we run out of time. We have another speakers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Riyad. Thank you, Dr. Ammar. Thank you to all the speakers at this very interesting session. Before we move on to our next session, we have a very important guest who couldn't be with us online yesterday. He's with us today. Dr. Nuruddin Mohammed. He's a professor and the president of the Pakistan Dohat Society, the executive secretary to the International Society of the Dohat, who are one of the main supporters of the conference. He's online with us. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon, everyone out there. I would wish to express my gratitude to the President and the ECN members for inviting me to this wonderful meeting. And congratulations to the entire ECN team for arranging this very important event. I won't take much time, but would wish to congratulate all the presenters for being part of this conference. And without the presence and contribution, the conference wouldn't have been enriched the way it is now. I'm further delighted to note that there is a good participation from the members of the International Society for the Dohat from different regions, as you have been hearing them yesterday, and you would hear some of them speaking again today in the ongoing meeting. I'm happy to note that the conference has covered almost all the aspects of nutrition and its relevance to life course approach, which is very important, ranging from nutrition in clinical care, maternal and neonatal nutrition, nutrition in palliative care, and sports nutrition as well. How I would wish to add for future, while I was going through the program, it will be interesting if the conference organizers would consider, probably for the next onwards meeting, about talking about preconception nutrition in conflict areas, in war zone countries, and internally displaced population, and how climate change is currently impacting our nutrition and lifestyle. So these are the couple of feedbacks I would wish to give it to the organizers. And I look forward to the conference organizers keeping up this quality work, and will continue to arrange such events in future. And I thank the President and ECN team once again for inviting me to this meeting. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we will have you with us physically in the near future conferences as well. Thank you. We will be moving on to our second session. It will be conducted by Dr. Halima Sabah, the Associate Professor at Abu Dhabi University. She is also the Senior Public Health Nutrition Specialist at the Public Health Department, College of Health Sciences, Abu Dhabi. She will be moderating this session for this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much for introducing me. So now, before the lunch break, we will have an interesting session about the maternity nutrition. I hope that you will enjoy it. We have 3 speakers at this session. 2 of them, they will join us online, and the third one will be here also. So the interesting topics that we will talk about them, it's about FIGO nutrition checklist for identifying and counseling nutritionally at-risk women before and during pregnancy, from Dr. Chanandini Maria Jacob. And the second session will be about dietary adequacy during first trimester pregnancy and its relationship with family structure. And the third one will be about food safety knowledge among pregnant women in the United Arab Emirates. So we will start with the first session, with the first speaker, with Dr. Chandni Maria Jacob. She is specialized in policy officers, and she's working at the in UK at the University of South Hampshire in UK. She is also she holds a master in public health and a PhD in human development and health, and she has collaborated with the WHO and the Euro on the relevant topics, also addressing life stages, life courses, and she is also a member of the International Federation of Obstetric and Gynecologists, Pregnancy and Obesity. She is also, her PhD also focused on the preconception health and life course approach to prevention of non-communicable diseases. Also she has conducted the research on multiple life stages such as childhood, adolescenthood, and adulthood using life course lens to support healthy aging. And currently also she is a coordinator and consultant with the WHO in Geneva, working as a specialist policy officer. So Dr. Chanandi, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, doctor. Please unmute yourself, Dr. Chandni, at full screen mode. Unmute yourself, please. Please, Dr. Chandni, you unmute yourself.
It seems that you are muted.
You are muted. Self-muted.
I am unmuted now. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
And are you able to view my screen?
Yes. Okay. Good to go. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You have 20 minutes because we are behind and we need to stick on the time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation and by the president as well as the Nutrition Society, as well as for the introductions from the chair. I'm Dr. Chandni Maria Jacob, and I'm based in Southampton. And today I will be providing an introduction on the importance of nutrition, particularly in the preconception period before pregnancy, before moving on to discussing the FIGO nutrition checklist, which is a practical tool developed by the International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetrics for nutritional assessment, both in the antenatal period, but also in before pregnancy, as well as for adolescent health. We've heard from multiple speakers before about the importance of nutrition during pregnancy, and we know that in each trimester there are unique requirements for pregnant women, for example, in the first trimester for iron, B12, folate, and then moving on to second, third trimester with the macronutrients, as well as in the postpartum periods for calcium, for example. But recently, the importance of the period before pregnancy has also been highlighted, and with the increase in the rates of maternal obesity globally, not just limited to the Western countries. Now we can see that increasingly in all regions across the world, whereas in some countries, for example, in India and South Africa, you also have the coexistence of malnutrition and micronutrition deficiencies, along with maternal obesity or maternal underweight. So there's a range of issues to be considered by healthcare practitioners who meet women between the ages of 18 to 45 who are having this potential of becoming pregnant in the near future. And we've also heard about this concept of the developmental origins of health and disease, where this period before pregnancy as well as during pregnancy, particularly the first trimester, is a critical period for organ development of the infant. So some of these risks are then transferred to the next generation for non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and high blood pressure. So what exactly is the preconception period? The definitions of this preconception period has varied. If you look at literature, a very common definition used is 3 months before conception, or sometimes it is vaguely before conception or earlier in pregnancy. And this can extend through early pregnancy, which is often called periconception care. And now, importantly, what we call the 4th trimester, which is the postnatal period until the next pregnancy, which is called interconception care. This particular period is very important, particularly for gynecologists, for example, who may be able to have access to these women who have just had one delivery or their first pregnancy is now complete, but often may go on to have a second or a third pregnancy. And now the discussions on postpartum weight loss, for example, can be had before they actually go out of the system. So preconception care is defined by the WHO as the provision of biomedical, behavioral, and social health interventions to women and couples before conception occurs. And traditionally, a lot of this has focused on fertility planning, but when it comes to nutrition, it has been often limited to folic acid related discussions, which is of course very important. And even coverage of folic acid preconception is much lower than as seen for the first trimester period. But now what we are suggesting is this introduction of other aspects, for example, achieving a healthy balanced diet, discussions related to alcohol and smoking before pregnancy should be initiated as well. And very importantly, entering pregnancy at a baseline healthy weight can actually help with appropriate gestational weight gain. And the preconception as well as pregnancy period can have overall risks for both the mother and the offspring for non-communicable diseases, but also provides an opportunity to address some of these issues. For example, overweight and obesity or pre-existing type 2 diabetes or PCOS before pregnancy can lead to clinical perinatal complications such as preeclampsia, gestational hypertension, issues during actual delivery such as large for gestational age babies, but also the long-term impact on the mother and offspring should be considered, where women with gestational diabetes, for example, may go on and have a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes later on in their life course, with additional risks for the children also to develop type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes in later life. And there are some clinical barriers to finding or actually meeting women in the preconception period. The most common one being that all pregnancies, almost 50% in most countries across the world, are unplanned pregnancies. So there may be a lack of awareness among the people, there may be time constraints. A lot of healthcare professionals feel there's too much topics to cover in a clinical session, and whether it is their own professional responsibility to be discussing preconception nutrition or not. From some of our work with midwives in the UK has shown that a lot of the discussion tends to be more focused on the health of the fetus than issues related to nutrition or weight gain in the mother. So a lot of training for healthcare practitioners was needed, and this was a gap that we identified for both OBGYNs as well as for midwives. So as part of the FIGO's Pregnancy, Obesity and Nutrition Initiative, we released a couple of years ago a review of international guidelines using a DOHAT perspective on what was available as preconception evidence for intergenerational transmission of risk, as well as for the long-term health of the mother. And we wrote a position paper with recommendations, which provided a simple set of recommendations to increase awareness about the importance of preconception counseling for women in the reproductive age group, irrespective of pregnancy intention. And by that we mean was in clinical discussions and consultations, an option can be provided to ask them about pregnancy intention, and if they are intending to get pregnant, then some of these conversations on weight gain, folic acid consumption can be had there. And if they are not, then appropriate contraception counseling can be provided. And this document summarizes key evidence from international clinical guidelines for predominant areas of preconception health related to non-communicable diseases, and they are applicable not only to specialists but also to community health workers, endocrinologists who may come across women who have existing type 2 diabetes but maybe fertility planning currently. The key messages were that pre and interconception care is a very important opportunity to have to deliver preventive services for non-communicable diseases. However, education and training of healthcare practitioners must be addressed urgently, particularly to improve their confidence in raising nutrition and weight management related issues. And healthcare organizations such as FIGO, as well as the Nutrition Society, DOHAT Society, needs to give attention to the dissemination of such clinical guidelines for preconception weight and nutrition management, and to use simple tools for clinical practice. And because a lot of the practitioners we spoke to showed this sort of lack of confidence, the FIGO committee had initially developed a tool called as the FIGO Pregnancy Nutrition Checklist, which is this one here. And so this was actually developed with a target audience globally as a generic checklist to be used in early pregnancy period. But recently, in the last 2 to 3 years, we have actually worked on developing different versions of the checklist, different translations of the checklist, and actually identifying if this checklist will be acceptable, whether this is feasible to use in clinical practice, and whether this can be validated, which I will now talk about. So this was developed by the International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecologists Adolescent Preconception and Maternal Nutrition Subgroup. And it is a very simple 2-page checklist where on the first page, as you see, there are several questions about dietary intake. And on the page behind, there is opportunity for the patient as well as the healthcare practitioner to then note down their body mass index, discuss appropriate gestational weight gain based on the IOM guidelines, as well as all the information that the patient can then take home based on the micronutrient requirements, for example. So most of these questions are yes or no questions, It helps in flagging up any dietary deficits from the answers which are based on no. So this is not a dietary evaluation questionnaire. It's not for research purpose. It's mainly for clinical use. It can be completed very fast within 5 minutes. And most often we ask the patient to complete this before coming to the OPD when they're in the waiting room. And then quickly the midwife or the OBGYN can then discuss whatever deficits were seen, or if there's an inadequacies, for example, in supplement intake, folic acid intake, and this can be also modified based on the dietary guidelines of particular countries. For example, in the UK, the definitions for folic acid intake during pregnancy or early pregnancy or preconception for women with obesity or overweight is slightly different from that used in the US, for example, or in Ireland. So so we've also developed an online version of this checklist, which people can complete on their smartphones. Initially, this was a paper-based version, but we also got some feedback that people would like to maybe complete it at home. And then rather than, if the paper versions may sometimes go missing, but in a practical way, having this online tool, they could actually have this on their phone, and the feedback will also then be available on their phone for them to download and save. So the key issues addressed in the checklist also include special diets. For example, we recently modified it so that it includes examples on vegan diets as well as vegetarian diets. It covers questions on food intake based on whole grain intake, vegetable and fruit consumption, nuts and seeds, as well as things like oily fish. It has questions on supplement intake as well as on weight. So hopefully this video can be watched. I'll just play it very shortly. So, so after that checklist is completed, this is how the pages with the feedback looks like on the online version. So, for example, for fruit and veg, if they've clicked an inadequate amount of portions of fruit and veg per week, then such feedback is available for them, along with what do you also need: folic acid, vitamin D, iron, and some examples on sources. Of course, we've tried to keep this global, but we do encourage our sort of more national regional healthcare practitioners to include examples in their discussions for local diets and personalize it as far as possible for the patient using a very patient-centered approach. A recent review that the FIGO team had conducted tried to include some of these dietary recommendations from different countries. And we can see that there are differences, for example, in how definitions of a serving size is defined in different countries. For example, for dairy products, it's usually, and in most countries, around 3 servings per day is mentioned. However, in some countries, it's only mentioned as every day. So some of these definitions do change. So healthcare practitioners will have to customize the recommendations in the checklist based on their national dietary guidelines. And several studies now have actually tested with smaller sample sizes, but have pilot tested the use, particularly for validation of the checklist. For example, in Hong Kong, this was translated into traditional Chinese, and it actually helped in identifying suboptimal diets in around 95% of the women who were attending the clinic. And similarly, in Ireland, suboptimal diets were identified in 80% of the women who were attending the clinic by actually just administering the questionnaire. And what's very useful about the questionnaire right now is that even though right now we are trying to assess through longer evaluation whether this is actually producing a difference in preventing excessive gestational weight gain or postpartum weight retention. So that data for that is not available yet, but currently we do know that this checklist is feasible to implement in a clinical setting. We know that it is acceptable to patients as well as healthcare providers. And we also know that it is validated compared to other clinical nutrition screening tools where it actually identifies women who have a suboptimal diet before or during pregnancy. And some of the feedback we've gotten on the checklist from women have been overwhelmingly positive. And one of the things we saw in our study in the UK was that most of the time, many women said that the discussions on nutrition were not happening in the antenatal setting on a routine basis, and having something like the checklist to take with them gives them, sort of empowers them to actually initiate these discussions with the clinicians, and considering the short times of visits, and you have to discuss your ultrasound and your blood tests and the fetal growth and all of these things, sometimes having that little 1-minute discussion on nutrition can be quite helpful for most women. And similarly, the checklist study showed that over 80% it was acceptable with women, and a common barrier was lack of time, training, as well as communication techniques for healthcare practitioners. This is also recently tested in South Africa for a subgroup of women who had overweight or obesity as part of another randomized control trial with an additional element of training for the healthcare practitioners, which included counseling skills. And most women answered no to at least one diet quality questions in this study, and identified that especially for whole grain carbohydrate consumption, this was quite low. So there's qualitative research which highlighted that people thought that this was easy to use, and they thought it was a valuable dietary screening tool. And we do realize that we do need to get some more long-term data on whether this has an impact on things like prevalence of anemia or birth weight. So the key messages for healthcare providers is that the FIGO nutrition checklist will help address unmet nutritional needs globally. We know that currently, for example, it has been translated to Spanish and it's being used in Colombia. The resource is available freely on the FIGO website, and I'll show the link in a minute. And nutrition should be addressed with women of reproductive age to improve their health across the life course, not just limited for that pregnancy, but also considering the mother's risk of type 2 diabetes after the pregnancy is over, and also the child's risk of factors such as childhood obesity and long-term health. So this is the link where the FIGO checklist is available online, and it's available in English, and French and Spanish will soon be available on the website. But as Tsoye told it, this can be translated by other study teams if they would like to do it in their local languages. And we recently also published a supplement issue discussing some of these studies which I just mentioned, which is available open access online. So I just want to thank the FIGO team as well as my study team and the Emirates Clinical Nutrition Society Conference again, and the International Dohat Society for the invitation. Thank you very much.
So we will move to the next speaker, who also online, Dr. Rosania Nuruddin. She's an assistant professor and the director for the PhD program in population and public health at Aja Khan University in Pakistan. Dr. Rosania, the floor is yours, so you can start.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, thank you to organizer for inviting me and being part of this important conference on nutrition. It's an honor to represent the Pakistan Dohat Society and to share the work on the dietary adequacy during first trimester and its relationship with the family structure. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, full screen mode, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So,
Okay,
okay, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Rosina Nuruddin, and I work as an assistant professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences, and as introduced, is directing the PhD program in population and public health. As we all know that the maternal diet is one of the major determinant of the in utero environment and has a significant influence on the maternal and fetal health. It plays an important role in influencing the fetal metabolic programming and the growth trajectories. Sorry. The dietary adequacy primarily consists of two key components. One is the quantity, which means that there should be a sufficient intake of both macro and micronutrients in the diet. And at the same time, we need to focus on the dietary quality, which means inclusion of the diverse variety of the food choices in our diet. Maternal diet has been found to influence the several pregnancy outcomes, and it has been found that the diet that is rich in fruits, vegetables, fish, and dairy product has been associated with a lower risk of gestational diabetes mellitus and preterm births. On the other hand, the Western dietary pattern in the form of red and processed meat, refined grains, high sugar, and fried items is associated with the increased risk of gestational diabetes mellitus. Similarly, the inadequate dietary diversity is associated with increased risk of low birth weight and preterm birth. Keeping in mind the importance of the maternal nutrition, it is also important to look that pregnancy is a critical phase in the life of a woman, which reflects the accelerated physiological changes and the growth that occur from the time of conception till the baby is born. First trimester especially holds substantial importance as it marks the processes of placental development and organogenesis. At the same time, there is an adaptation of maternal endocrine and metabolic system for the subsequent trimesters. And for clinicians and healthcare professionals, this time period is especially important as it helps them to identify the suboptimal lifestyle behaviors in women, such as related to diet, physical activity, and substance abuse, and provides us an opportunity for early intervention. The key nutritional indicators for the Pakistani woman of reproductive age are not very promising. As has been highlighted earlier, that beside micronutrient deficiency, we are facing the double burden of malnutrition in the form of both undernutrition and overnutrition. In Pakistan, 14.4% of the women are classified as undernourished, having a BMI of less than 18.5, whereas 24% and 13.8% are respectively classified as overweight and obese. Only 46% are found to have the normal BMI based on a National Nutrition Survey of Pakistan conducted in 2018. The earlier presenters have already highlighted about the various determinants of maternal diet, which can be social and biological and cultural and many other aspects. But in this study, in our study, we focus on the cultural aspect of the maternal diet, which is the type of the family structure. As we know that the family structure can be classified as nuclear structure, which comprises of only husband, wife, and children, or there can be a joint or extended family system where several generations may be part of the family. And that different type of family structure has been found to influence the dietary diversity for the pregnant woman. In South Asia, joint family structures are common because of the perceived benefit of shared financial resources, and there is also an additional support available during the critical phases of illness, pregnancy, or lactation, in the form of assistance with the domestic chores and food preparation for the pregnant woman. But now the family structures are evolving towards a nuclear type with increasing urbanization, lack of sufficient living spaces, and a desire for improved education and empowerment. As a result, the pregnant women bear greater responsibilities towards household tasks, food preparation, and childcare. In addition, the women are increasingly getting engaged in employment activities, and hence the pregnant women are facing challenges in meeting their own dietary needs. In Pakistan, there are only few small-scale studies that have assessed the dietary intake of pregnant women. Um, However, these studies have not explicitly looked into both the dietary quantity and quality for the several food groups during the first trimester. Additionally, there is a scarcity of evidence with regard to the influence of maternal diet after adjustment of other determinants. So our primary objective was to determine the dietary adequacy both for quantity and quality among first trimester pregnant women who are visiting the tertiary care hospital in Karachi. And our secondary objective was to assess the influence of family structure on dietary adequacy, taking into account its other determinants. Sorry. And our hypothesis was that for the secondary objective, that the women living in nuclear families would have suboptimal dietary adequacy compared to the women living in the extended families. So our study was in the form of a hospital-based cross-sectional study conducted in the antenatal clinic of the Arkan University Hospital, Karachi, between January 2020 to September 2021. We included pregnant women. We included pregnant women who attended the antenatal clinics of the Aga Khan University, who were over 18 years and were in the first trimester and who agreed to participate in the study. We excluded the pregnant women who had comorbidities and were using medications regularly and were unable to read and write. In this way, we were able to enroll a total of 306 pregnant women and through a purposive sampling strategy. We used a structured questionnaire which was pre-tested on 10% of the sample, and the various components of our questionnaire included looking at the socio-demographic characteristics such as age, ethnicity, education, occupation of both woman and spouse, the monthly household income, family structure, house ownership, and the household size. In addition, we collected information about the obstetric history in the form of parity, the mode of conception, whether it was spontaneous or assisted, and any history of nausea, vomiting, or use of antiemetics. The dietary history was collected using food frequency questionnaire, where we collected information about the portion size and frequency of various food items that fall under the 6 major food groups over the period of 1 week before the survey. We also collected information about the water intake, consumption of homemade meals, any kind of food allergy or avoidance, and the consumption of additional salt. Information about height, weight, blood pressure, and hemoglobin level was collected through medical records. The dietary adequacy was assessed based on a set of questions that assess portions and the frequency of the food item consumed on the 6 major food groups. And these groups included related to carbohydrate consumption in the form of bread, cereal, rice, pasta, or potato, fruits and vegetables, fish, poultry, meats, and beans reflecting protein intake, milk and milk products, and oil and fats. We calculated dietary risk score based on a WHO guideline, and for each food group, the dietary quantity and quality was assessed separately. And on a scale of 0 to 3, we provided a score of 0 if the dietary intake was adequate, a score of 1.5 if the quality or quantity was out of intermediate, and score of 3 if the dietary intake was inadequate for quality or quantity. As a result, for each of the individual groups, since there were 6 groups, we sum up the score for each group, and these scores range from 0 to 18, with the 0 reflecting the adequate dietary quantity or quality for all the groups, and 18 reflecting the highly inadequate diet across all the food groups. This is the chart which can help us understand how did we calculate the dietary risk score For example, for the bread, cereal, rice, and pasta and potato group, the quantity was considered as adequate if 6 portions were used, and the quality was adequate if more than 50% comprised of the whole grains. And similarly for fruits, if there were more than 2 portions consumed and in the form of whole fruit, it was considered as the adequate quantity and quality. For vegetables, it was more than 3 portions, and if greater than 1/3 was in the form of raw and less than 2/3 was in the form of cooked product. Similar approach was used for the other dietary groups. So if you look at the socio-demographic characteristics, we find that the mean age of the participant was about 28 years, and about 2/3 belonged to less than 30 years of age. About 48% were immigrants to Karachi, and 96% were Muslim. The women education up to grade 12 was for about 1/4 of the population, and the rest had the university education. For fathers, only 8.2% had the education up to grade 12. The rest had university education. Only 34% of the mothers were employed, and all fathers had employment. About the 2/3 of the family have the income less than $620. About 3/4 own the house, and 80% of the mothers reported living in the extended family structure, and 20% in the nuclear family structure, and about half of the participants had the household members less than or equal to 5. Primary gravida made 43.8% of the population, and those who are multi-gravida, at least 59% had at least one child. Spontaneous conception was reported by 97% of the population. The history of nausea by almost 70% of the subjects, and vomiting 55% of the subject, and use of antiemetics by 36% of the subjects. With regard to BMI, we found that a great proportion, about 44%, were found to be obese based on the booking height and weight measurement, and about 1/4 of them were anemic with the hemoglobin level less than 11 grams. The food allergies were reported by almost 6% of the population, and to meat, fish, or egg. And similarly, the food avoidance was reported by 4% of the population. The daily consumption of the homemade meals was like 3 meals were consumed, which were homemade by 75% of the subjects. The total dietary score in terms of quantity and quality showed that on an average, 10.6 was the mean dietary score for quantity and 7.5 for the quality, indicating that there was inadequacy more for the quantity than for the quality. This figure shows the dietary score for the quantity and quality of the 6 different food groups. And as we can see that for the bread, cereal, rice, and pasta, only the blue lines indicate basically the dietary score for quantity, and red for the quality. And here we can see that only 14.4% were classified under the adequate quantity for bread, cereal, rice, and pasta group, and 21% for the quality in this group. Whereas for vegetables, we can clearly see that only 0.3% reported consuming adequate quantity during a day, and only 49% reported adequate quality for consumption for the vegetable, which means a mix of raw and cooked vegetable. For the milk and milk products, again, only 1% reported consuming adequate quantity, which means 3 portions or 3 glasses of milk in a day, whereas adequate quality for the milk and milk product consumption. For fruits, the quantity was only adequate quantity was reported only by 41%, and the quality for 88%. And for great number. And similarly for the fish and poultry, meat and beans group, none of them reported adequate quality, but only 18.5% reported adequate quantity. For oils and fat, 90.5% reported adequate quantity, but only 8.8% reported adequate quality. When we looked at the determinants of dietary quantity through univariate and multivariate analysis, we found the nuclear family as a significant predictor of the poor dietary quantity. Similarly, the woman who had experienced vomiting during first trimester suffer from poor dietary quantity consumption, and if the woman only consume one time homemade meal, it affects her dietary quantity consumption. For dietary quality, the spouse education has a role to play, and if the spouse education is up to intermediate compared to the group who had university or higher education, the dietary quality is negatively affected, and similarly the nuclear family structure negatively affects the dietary quality. A study is one of the few studies that has evaluated the dietary quantity and quality for the pregnant women during first trimester. We assess both dietary quantity and quality comprehensively for all the 6 groups using the WHO guideline. Our limitation is we use the selective sample which who attended a tertiary care hospital and hence have reflected a better socioeconomic standing than the general population. And with regard to the dietary information, there can be a possibility of recall bias as the information was collected for the dietary history over the past 7 days. We conclude that dietary inadequacies are observed during first trimester of pregnancy, and the food groups that reflected both the inadequacies in both quantity and quality were bread, cereal, rice, pasta, and potato group, protein group with fish, poultry, meat, and beans, and milk products. For vegetables, the dietary quantity was found to be inadequate, and for oils and fat, the dietary quality was found to be inadequate. With regard to the determinants of dietary adequacy, nuclear family is associated with inadequacies in both dietary quantity and quality, whereas the history of vomiting and eating fewer home-cooked meals negatively affected the dietary quantity, while the low spouse education negatively affected the dietary quality. Hence, we recommend that antenatal counseling should play during the first trimester should focus especially on educating women on health, on consumption of healthy, adequate, and diverse diet. And women living in the nuclear families should be given special attention in terms of guidance with regard to the identification of healthy and diverse food choices. These are some of my references, and thank you for your kind attention. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address during the panel discussion.
Dr. Rosina, for this nice presentation. So our last presentation is about the food safety knowledge among pregnant women in the UAE. That will be presented by Ms. Ramiz Dagour. Ms. Ramiz, she completed her master in food safety and clinical nutrition from Sharjah University, and now she is working as research assistant at the University of Sharjah. Ms. Ramiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Halima. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, the pointer. So starting. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of the Emirates Nutrition Society for having us today. To present our food safety knowledge research that has been conducted by our research team at the University of Sharjah. This one here, okay. So I'll start off with a brief background, followed by the details and the methodology of this particular research, and I'll end the presentation with some conclusions and recommendations of take-home messages. So starting off with the base, or what caused the importance of food safety, which are foodborne diseases. Now, foodborne diseases are causing emerging public health concern currently, and that's worldwide. Around 1 in 10 people get sick from contaminated food or water worldwide, and that's growing to 600 million people worldwide. So that's a quite big number. In fact, it's causing, just a second, sorry. So that's a quite big number, which is causing a concern for the general population and for certain vulnerable groups as well. But there are many contributors that can contribute to this. First of all, for example, unhealthy eating habits or shopping choices can contribute. And another important thing is food safety knowledge. Those that lack the food safety information tend to acquire foodborne illnesses. So what happens is, as we all know, there are many disease-causing microorganisms that can lead to foodborne illnesses. It simply gets into our system through the ingestion of water or food that has been contaminated and leads to several symptoms, including vomiting, diarrhea, and many more. But the point is, some microbes do alarm us. They do alert us that, okay, this particular food product is not safe, by simply changing the odor, the taste, or even some sensorial qualities such as the color. However, other microbes simply persist in the food, and we tend to ingest it without exhibiting any changes in quality, and it leads to foodborne illnesses. And also, it is very challenging because some types of microbes can persist from a day, and it can persist up to a week, getting into our systems without showing any symptoms. So who is at risk? We are all at risk of foodborne illnesses, but there are certain vulnerable groups which are at highest risk and more susceptible, since immunity plays a very important factor here. First, immunocompromised patients. Immunocompromised, of course, they receive therapies that tend to affect their immunity and therefore are more susceptible. Similarly with children and elderly. And the vulnerable group that we have studied, which are pregnant women. In fact, pregnant women are 18 times more prone to infection than the general population. So that being said, consider this example about the pregnant women. Pregnant women actually are susceptible to various infections and diseases. But for example, a common infection is listeria. So what happens with listeria, to prevent it, as soon as the pregnancy is detected, the healthcare professional would advise the pregnant woman to avoid certain food products, such as unpasteurized foods or raw food. But there are other factors that may contribute to the consumption of food products leading to foodborne illnesses, those that could be directly or indirectly. For example, the pregnant woman can be avoiding the specific food products, not taking into consideration factors such as cross-contamination, temperature control, or during the preparation of the food product. So that's where the targeted education comes into place. This is why it's very important to have knowledge, because we do not guarantee the adherence of these vulnerable groups throughout their 9 months of pregnancy. So targeted education about all factors that can affect play a significant role. So why did we conduct this study? This study was conducted targeting several clinics and hospitals in the United Arab Emirates. Now, there are studies in the literature which focus on food safety knowledge for pregnant and non-pregnant women, but the studies are lacking in the Arab region and in the United Arab Emirates. In fact, it's the first in the United Arab Emirates targeting food safety knowledge for pregnancy. So that being said, this brings us to the objective of the study that has been conducted, which is assessing the general knowledge of food safety for pregnant women among the United Arab Emirates. So throughout the study, throughout this cross-sectional study, trained researchers approached participants to fill a questionnaire. Some prefer to do it online, and some prefer to fill it in person. Only those that are 18 years or older and residing in the UAE were included in the study. The awareness-based scores or the total scores of the questionnaires were calculated based on several aspects that I'll be discussing in the presentation. We assured to cover all different aspects of food safety in our questionnaire. These are the several aspects that were focused on, starting with the personal hygiene, cross-contamination, food consumption and safety, temperature, cleaning, sanitation, and knowledge of foodborne illnesses, to assure that all the factors have been covered with regards to the safety of the food products or the food practices. Okay. And of course, it's worthy to note that the results, the correct answers that has been taken from this questionnaire were based on the updated guidelines or recommendations from the WHO and FDA. So out of 398 participants, or out of 398 pregnant women, 354 agreed to fill the questionnaire and completed the questionnaire. The participants were from different parts of the United Arab Emirates, including Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, and Northern Emirates. Most participants were educated as a college degree or above, and they have acquired several pregnancies before, which means that this wasn't their third pregnancy. And almost half of the participants were in the third trimester, and they received food safety knowledge before, which means that this was not their this was not the first time they encountered food safety knowledge. So before discussing each and every aspect, I'd like to walk you through the total scores of the entire questionnaire aspects that were assessed. It's worthy to note that pregnant women were more knowledgeable, or our participants were more knowledgeable of foodborne illnesses and of personal hygiene practices, whereas they were least knowledgeable about cross-contamination and temperature control, which is expected because cross-contamination and temperature control are critical aspects that are usually acquired through several educational practices, as in specific cooking temperatures, for example, or specific storage temperatures. So starting with the personal hygiene, our participants had a good information overall about the personal hygiene practices, which are general, such as washing your hands before preparation of food, the general food hygiene practices, but they were not very aware of the exact timing that is needed for the washing, which is usually recommended at least 20 seconds, and they were not very aware of the importance of wearing gloves during food preparation. With regards to cross-contamination, now arrangement of food products based on the group of food is way more important than arranging it based on the spaces and the distributions. But our pregnant women were not very much aware of this. A very less percentage, around 30%, knew or they answered correct that salads should not be, like the arrangement between salads and raw food, that salads should be placed on the top of raw poultry and meat rather than the other way around. So there, and even a less percentage knew about the importance of washing knives to avoid cross-contamination between different food groups. With regards to temperature control, they almost lacked knowledge of temperature control, very minor information they knew about temperature control, which again is expected because several studies in the United Arab Emirates or several studies in the literature have shown that temperature control is lacking. Speaking of cleaning and sanitation, our participants had a good amount of information about cleaning and sanitation, but it was contradicting. They knew that they need to sanitize countertops very well, which is usually the usual daily practices, but they did not know what is the effective way of washing fruits and vegetables. So again, there are plenty of gaps even with the regular day-to-day food safety practices. Finally, with regards to the food safety awareness or the information about foodborne diseases, this scored the highest. Our pregnant women or participants were very much educated about, or at least they did score well about the foodborne diseases. Around 81% was the score for foodborne diseases, scoring the highest out of all different aspects. So when it comes to the association between the food safety awareness and some social demographic characteristics of the participants, those that were encountering their first pregnancy had the highest knowledge, which does make sense again, because usually on the first pregnancy, the woman or the mother is usually more keen to know more about food safety knowledge. In addition, so there have been a significant difference. In addition, those that were educated as a college level or above also had the highest knowledge with regards to food safety awareness. Okay, so to sum this up, our pregnant participants, pregnant women, had the highest awareness about foodborne diseases and personal hygiene practices, whereas the lowest about cross-contamination and temperature control. So that's where we point the different gaps that are present. Moreover, higher education level at first pregnancies or higher food safety awareness levels at first pregnancies rather than the second or the third pregnancy and so on. And of course, those that were more educated scored the highest. So pregnant women do not have an adequate knowledge of food safety. To recommend, it is really recommended to have just like regular pregnant checkups, to have regular updated information or education about food safety. Some aspects cannot be simply taught at once. Regular information is very important, and to assure adherence as well is an important factor. And usually pregnant women encounter a lot of immunological and physiological alterations. So follow-up is very important. In addition, collaboration with healthcare providers, the #1 providers and usually pregnant women that would seek to, is essential. And we do recommend that in the future, other aspects are studied, such as attitudes and practices other than the knowledge. I'm also would like to share with you that this publication has been published in a high impact journal by our research team, led by Dr. Aisha Al-Zahri, Dr. Layla Sheikh, and Dr. Tariq Al-Saili. Other related work that was also conducted by our research team within the same scope involving pregnant women include a similar study that was conducted in Jordan about food safety knowledge, and it was conducted in Jordan amongst pregnant women and also during the COVID-19 era. Other two studies that was conducted similarly involved mental health studies that focused on pregnant women, one focusing on mental health and lifestyle, and another one that focused on the post-traumatic stress. Yeah, the post-traumatic stress. And that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramiz, for this interesting presentation about your study. So before lunch, we can have 2 questions. And for those who want to go to the lunch, it will be on the 6th floor. And we have to be back here at 2 p.m. So we can pick 2 questions for our speakers. Yes, Dr. Riyad. Can we have the mic, please?
Thank you very much, Ramiz, for the excellent presentation information. I want just to ask you, in real life, we have popular foods like shawarma, sushi, and others. What do you think about these popular foods, specifically shawarma and sushi, with pregnant women? And which level of trimester do you recommend?
Okay, so these food products, again, we are not guaranteed how they have been cooked, even though, okay, the shawarma has cooked meat, but still, let's avoid eating outside for pregnant women because she's not very guaranteed about the type of temperature. A very important factor that was considered here is temperature, and at very critical points. So that's #1. For raw foods involving sushi, for example, some pregnant women would be like, I'm eating cooked sushi. But again, there is another factor that we assessed here, cross-contamination. Since sushi is cooked in the same facility, same setting, or raw food is being cooked in the same setting, so you're not guaranteed if this is actually cooked or it has been cross-contaminated with other raw food from the same cuisine. So according to the general guidelines, now they do recommend that it should be avoided until the 3rd trimester. The last trimester would be fine. But again, to stay on the safe side, each pregnant woman has a different perspective about this, but to stay on the safe side, avoid it throughout pregnancy because you are at risk of immunity. I mean, your immunity is not well. So avoiding it throughout the pregnancy would avoid getting any type of infection, whether it was listeria or any other type of infection risking your health. So I hope I got your answers, Dr. Riyad. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering the question. Any other question? Last question. We can have one question before lunch. If no question, then we can go to lunch.
Yes, of course, go to. Thank you so much.
You are hungry. So we have to come back at 2 p.m. here, and the lunch will be on the 6th floor. See you at 2 p.m.